thought wife was cheating, prepared for divorce. But her friend revealed it was all a lie to test me. I went silent, let the lawyer do the rest. So, my wife Camila and I have been married for 8 years, and life has been nice. Not perfect, but good. We both work full-time jobs, and we have routines and weekend activities, as well as date nights once a month when we are not exhausted from work. I thought we were doing well, not in the honeymoon phase, but as a normal married couple who are comfortable with one another and don't need to be all over each other all the time. But evidently, Camila has been discussing our marriage with her divorced friends, and they've been filling her mind with all this bullshit about how I'm not attentive enough, not passionate enough, and how she needs to make me fight for her, or some other silly nonsense. And I'm finding out about this after the event, which makes it even worse. While I'm going through absolute hell, convinced that my wife is cheating on me, she's hatching this complex plan with her bitter pals who can't bear the thought that someone else might have a nice marriage. Camila started acting strangely about 6 weeks ago. She was suddenly working late all the time and returning home with a guilty expression on her face, as well as feeling exhilarated and clandestine. When I asked her about her day, she became vague and changed the subject. She began dressing more nicely for work, taking longer to get ready in the morning, and wearing perfume, which she had never worn to work before. At first, I assumed she was arranging a surprise for me because our anniversary is coming up in a few months. But then she began receiving texts at unusual hours. When her phone buzzed, she grabbed it quickly and turned it face down. When I inquired who was texting her so late, she'd pretend it was just work or her sister, but she'd become agitated and defensive. Then there was the night she arrived home at nearly midnight and claimed to have been out with the girlfriends, but she smelled like men's cologne and her lipstick was smudged. When I asked her about it, she stated she had hugged someone farewell, but she couldn't look me in the eyes. And I am not an idiot. I know what it looks like when someone has kissed someone else. Following that, I began to pay closer attention, and the indications continued to pile up. When I stepped in, she was on the phone in the other room and hurriedly hung up. She started doing laundry more frequently and acting strangely about it, as if she didn't want me to see specific clothes. She was showering as soon as she got home from work, which she didn't usually do. She continued talking about this new guy at her company named Sam, how hilarious he was, and how he'd assisted her with a project. The Sam thing really got to me because she would bring him up in conversation, then stop herself and shift the subject. When I questioned her more about him, she'd act strangely and pretend he was just a coworker. But she'd previously told me far too much about him for him to be simply a random colleague. For example, she said that he rides a motorbike, that he recently divorced, and that he enjoys rock climbing, all of which are personal things that you wouldn't normally know about casual coworkers. I tried to explain to her how distant she'd been acting. She just brushed me off, saying I was being paranoid, that she was just stressed out at work, fatigued, and wanted some space. But the more room I gave her, the worse things got, and it became clear that something was wrong. And I'm not the type of person to bury my head in the sand and pretend everything is all right, when it clearly isn't. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago, when she stated she was going to supper with her sister. But then I saw her sister in the grocery store, and when I mentioned that Camila was supposed to be with her, her sister seemed bewildered and stated she had no plans with Camila. That was when I knew she was lying to me, and most likely meeting up with this Sam man. I confronted her when she got home that night and asked her directly whether she was having an affair. She became outraged and began crying, saying, "How could I think that about her?" and that she loved me and would never cheat on me. However, she was still unable to explain where she had gone or why she had lied about being with her sister. And when someone can't give you a straight answer about something so easy, you know they're concealing something significant. I did not sleep at all that night. I kept thinking about all the warning signals, the lies, and how she'd been treating me like an idiot for weeks. And I realized I couldn't keep living this way, wondering every day if my wife was faithful to me. I determined that I had to either find out the truth or terminate things, because this limbo was killing me. So I decided to hire a private investigator since I needed proof before doing anything severe. I did not hire one. I was investigating divorce lawyers online to learn about my alternatives. I was honestly bracing myself for the worst-case scenario, having to restart my entire life because my wife had been cheating on me with some motorcycle-riding rock climber from her workplace. But then, last Tuesday, everything changed, and I discovered the truth, although in the worst conceivable way. Camila's friend Giana called me very intoxicated and rambled about how happy she was of Camila for finally implementing their advice and making me jealous, and how everything was going so great since I was now paying attention to Camila again. and I had no idea what she was discussing. So I begged her to clarify, and the full story came out. Apparently, Camila and her divorced friends, Giana, Monica, and Jennifer, had been preparing this false romance for months in order to make me more attentive and romantic. And they'd convinced Camila that the greatest way to teach a guy to appreciate what he has is to make him believe he could lose it, which is the most bizarre logic I've ever heard. Giana told me that they had even assisted Camila in gathering all of the information on Sam, who appears to be a legitimate co-worker, but Camila has never spoken with him about anything other than work. And they'd been teaching her how to appear suspicious and secretive in order to trick me into believing she was cheating. And they found it amusing that their strategy was working so well, and that I was finally acting like a jealous husband battling for his wife. I hung up on Giana and sat there for perhaps an hour, trying to digest what I'd just heard. I experienced every emotion you can imagine. First, I was relieved that she wasn't really cheating. Then I got bewildered, since why would anyone do this to their spouse? Then I became more angry than I had ever been in my life, realizing that my wife had been torturing me on purpose for several weeks. When Camila arrived home that night, I informed her that Giana had called and spilled everything. I watched her face turn white, and then she began crying and apologizing, claiming it had all been a ridiculous prank, that she never intended for it to go so far, and that she would tell me the truth soon anyhow. But I was so angry that I couldn't even talk, and I told her that faking to cheat on your husband isn't a joke, it's emotional torture. She kept trying to explain how her friends had convinced her that our marriage was becoming stale, that I was taking her for granted, and that all she wanted was for me to pay her more attention and admiration. And she stated the strategy had worked because I had been more affectionate and attentive in recent weeks, which made me even furious, because she was correct. I was striving harder because I believed I was losing her. I told her that what she'd done was sick and manipulative, and that instead of simply talking to me about feeling unappreciated, she'd decided to make me believe she was having an affair and watch me suffer for weeks. I'd lost sleep, weight, and felt miserable every day, convinced that my marriage was crumbling apart. And she kept apologizing and admitting that she had made a mistake. But here's the thing, and this is what everyone keeps missing when I attempt to explain it to them. It wasn't a mistake or a terrible joke. It was a deliberate attempt to screw with my thoughts and emotions. And it worked just as expected. This implies Camila sat there every day, watching me be suspicious, concerned, and envious. She understood exactly why I was feeling that way, because she was inflicting it on purpose. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became, because I realized that every time I tried to speak with her about how distant she was, she made me feel anxious and uneasy. And every time I queried her about working late or receiving suspicious texts, she acted as if I was controlling and jealous, despite the fact that she was fully aware that her behavior was geared to make me feel that way. The worst part is that her pals thought this was amusing. They found it fun to watch me struggle and doubt myself and my marriage. They were undoubtedly chatting about me behind my back, laughing at how gullible I was, and how brilliantly their idiotic scheme worked. Camila took part in all of this. She was actively involved in making me the target of their joke. I told Camila I needed some time to think, but I knew I couldn't stay another moment in that house. I spent the next hour aimlessly tossing my clothes and personal belongings into bags and cartons. Not knowing how long I'd be gone, I left the majority of stuff at a nearby storage facility before taking only enough to get to my brother's place. While I was there, I couldn't stop thinking about how this affected our marriage and whether I could ever trust her again. Because if she can lie to my face for weeks and watch me suffer and think it's okay because her buddies urged her to, what else is she capable of? My brother, mom, and even some of my friends believe I'm overreacting and should forgive her because she wasn't cheating and was simply trying to grab my attention. But they don't understand how it felt to go through those weeks believing that my wife was betraying me and that my marriage was a fake. And they don't realize that the emotional pain of believing someone you love is cheating on you is the same, whether they're actually cheating or simply pretending to cheat. I kept picturing her with this same person, wondering what I had done wrong, how long it had been going on, and whether she had ever truly loved me, or whether she was just settling for me until someone better came along. And I was preparing how I would divide our belongings, where I would live, and how I would inform people that my marriage had failed. All of that mental and emotional anguish was absolutely unnecessary, and it was created by someone who claims to love me. Fortunately, the only simple aspect of the logistics was the house, as we simply rented the flat and the lease had always been in her name, so I was the one who had to go. After 4 days at my brother's house, I made up my mind and went to see a divorce attorney. When I gave him the complete tale, he said he'd never heard anything like it. but that emotional abuse and manipulation were definitely grounds for divorce, and that Camila's actions demonstrated a basic lack of respect for me and our marriage. I returned home and informed Camila that I had filed for divorce, and she completely lost it. She began shouting and crying, pleading with me not to abandon her, claiming that she would go to any length to make amends to me, that she would never listen to her pals again, and that she had learned her lesson. However, I informed her that the lesson she should have learnt was not to torment her partner for fun. And this is a lesson that adults should not have to learn. She called her parents and my parents and launched an entire effort to persuade me to change my mind. She kept stressing that divorce was too severe and that we should seek counseling to work through this. But I don't want to work through this because I don't want to marry someone who thinks it's okay to emotionally manipulate me and then behave as if I'm being unreasonable when I don't appreciate it. Her friends Giana and Monica had the audacity to phone me and tell me I was being overly sensitive, that it was a harmless prank, and that Camila had learned her lesson and would never do something like this again. I told them that if they thought what they'd done was innocent, they were even more deranged than I thought, and that they'd most likely destroy my marriage for their own amusement because they couldn't take seeing someone else happy when their own had failed. Giana became quite defensive, claiming that Camila had been whining about me not being romantic enough and paying enough attention to her, and that they were simply trying to assist her get what she needed out of her marriage. And I told Camila that if she had problems with our marriage, she should have discussed them with me rather than scheming with her bitter friends to play mind games with me. What really bothers me is that Camila still doesn't seem to grasp why what she did was so terrible. She keeps harping on the fact that she didn't truly cheat and that everything was a lie, as if that makes things any better. But she doesn't seem to understand that the emotional impact on me was the same as if she had cheated and that doing it on purpose makes things worse, not better. I've been sleeping at my brother's house for 2 weeks, and Camila is constantly texting me, urging me to come home and talk things out. She sent me a long email about how she recognizes she made a mistake and wants to go to marriage counseling to regain our trust. However, I do not believe that trust can be re-established after something like this. Because how do I know she won't put me to the test again the next time her pals give her lousy advice? Everyone keeps questioning if I truly want to end my 8-year marriage over this one incident. But it is not a single instance. It's been weeks of deliberate misinformation and manipulation. And it's the realization that my wife thinks so little of me that she'd make me go through emotional misery simply to get her attention. The divorce papers were served yesterday, and Camila called me crying and pleading with me to reconsider. She stated that she had cut off contact with Giana, Monica, and Jennifer, and that she would do whatever it took to regain my trust. But I told her that the problem wasn't with her buddies. The difficulty was that she initially thought what they were offering was a good idea. I know some people believe I am being too harsh and should give her another chance. But I keep thinking about the weeks when I couldn't eat or sleep properly because I was afraid of losing her. And I kept thinking about how she saw me go through it, understood precisely what was going on, and still allowed it to happen. And I can't get over that. Maybe if she had come clean after a few days and told me it was all a lie, I could have forgiven her. But she let it go for weeks, and she was willing to let it go even longer. If Giana hadn't gotten drunk and shared the secret, I might never have known. And that reveals everything I need to know about her true personality. So that's where things are right now. I'm getting divorced, and everyone thinks I'm insane for abandoning my wife over a simple joke. But I know what she did wasn't innocent, and it wasn't a joke. It was a betrayal of what marriage is meant to be about, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life wondering what more tests she'll put me through. Aida for divorcing my wife due to this, because everyone continues making me feel as if I'm the one being unreasonable here. Update 1. Holy stuff. I didn't anticipate this to go as far as it did. I've been reading through all of the comments and messages, and I must say that it's been both reassuring and overwhelming to see so many people who understand why this was so important to me. Many individuals have asked for further information about Camila's activities over those weeks and how her pals were involved. So I'll try to fill in some of the blanks, because writing it all out the first time was really therapeutic and helped me process everything that happened. Camila's friends include Giana, who divorced 2 years ago after her husband cheated on her with his secretary; Monica, who has been divorced twice and is currently dating a guy she met on a dating app, who she constantly complains about; and Jennifer, who separated from her husband last year, and the divorce was only finalized a few months ago. They get together every Thursday night for what they call wine night, which is actually just a session where they sit around whining about men and relationships. I used to think it was harmless, and I even encouraged Camila to go because she appeared to love it. and I assumed everyone needed friends and interests. But now I know that these ladies have been poisoning her against me for months, telling her that I am overly comfortable in our marriage, that I do not respect her, and that she has to spice things up to remind me of what I could lose. Camila's exact actions throughout those 6 weeks were even worse than I described in my first piece. She began working out more and purchasing new outfits. And when I complimented her, she'd act secretive and say she was simply trying to feel better about herself, which led me to believe she was trying to look nice for someone else. She also began to be extremely critical of me in ways she had never been before, such as criticizing how I dressed for work, recommending that I get a better haircut, and questioning why I no longer planned surprise dates. At the time, I assumed she was going through some sort of midlife crisis. But now I realize she was following a script given to her by her pals to make me feel uneasy and inferior. All of the phone calls and texts were false as well. Giana and Monica would contact her at unexpected hours and call her in the nights, allowing her to act clandestine and guilty. They even studied this Sam person at her office to provide her with actual data to use in talks, such as looking him up on social media and learning about his motorcycle and interests. Camila would have authentic-looking information to give. But here's the bit that really gets me. Camila told me that they had created a timeline for this affair. They'd intended for it to last 2 or 3 months, with distinct phases in which Camila's suspicious behavior would gradually develop, making me increasingly envious and determined to win her back. Phase 1 involved being distant and covert. The second phase involved sending bogus texts and phone calls, as well as working late. Phase 3 was meant to involve her really going out, staying out late, and returning home with evident indicators that she had been with someone else. Phase 4 would see her disappear for entire nights, leading me to believe she was having full-fledged affairs. Thank goodness Giana got drunk and botched their plan before they got to phases 3 and 4, because I honestly don't know how I would have handled hearing that Camila was spending nights with another man. I was already struggling to keep up with what she was doing in phases 1 and 2. Camila also acknowledged that they had been photographing and filming her throughout the ordeal, documenting how angry and concerned I became and how their strategy was working. And they thought it was hilarious that I had started sending her flowers and organizing date evenings because I was so determined to save our marriage. That could be the most messed up aspect of it all. They were physically capturing my misery and treating it as entertainment. And Camila was not only fine with it, but actively participated by reporting back to them on how I was reacting to each new lie she told me. Many people in the comments questioned if Camila appeared to appreciate what she was doing, or if she was conflicted about it. And looking back, I believe she was getting off on the power and control part of it. She appeared vibrant and eager throughout those weeks in a way I hadn't seen in years, and I assumed it was because she was falling in love with someone else. But now I believe she was manipulating. She'd come home from work with a sneaky smile, and she'd watch me try to figure out what was unusual about her. When I asked inquiries, she would give me just enough information to keep me guessing, but not enough to alleviate my concerns. And there were times when I noticed she was almost delighted by how anxious and confused I was. I also discovered that her buddies had been advising her on how to gaslight me. For example, when I questioned her about lying about being with her sister, they told her to flip it around on me and make me feel guilty for not believing her, as well as for being neurotic and controlling, which she did. When I tried to talk to her about how distant she'd been acting, they encouraged her to make me feel needy and clinging, and that I should give her space, which is exactly what she did. So the whole affair felt like an organized psychological attack, aimed to make me doubt my own perceptions and believe I was the problem. The more I discover about what they did, the angrier I become, and the more confident I am that I made the correct decision in filing for divorce. Because this was not a harmless joke that got out of hand. This was an intentional attempt to emotionally attack me for their own enjoyment. Camila has been leaving me voicemails every day, imploring me to reconsider and saying that she will never speak to those friends again, and that she will go to any length to make things right. But the harm has been done, and I don't believe there will be any recovery from something like this. I've also received calls from her parents, and even her sister, pleading with me to give Camila another chance, and explaining that she's learned her lesson and that everyone makes errors. But this was not an error. This was a decision she made every day for 6 weeks. She had several opportunities to stop and tell me the truth, but she decided to continue. Her sister really accused me of being harsh by refusing to speak with Camila about working things out. And I told her that it is awful to watch your spouse struggle, worry, and doubt themselves when you know exactly why they are suffering, and you are causing it on purpose. The divorce is progressing, and I'm honestly feeling more at ease with my decision every day. Especially when I discover more about how meticulously planned and organized this entire event was. I understand that the woman I thought I married does not exist, and the real Camila believes it is appropriate to torture the person she pretends to love for amusement. Some folks have wondered if I'm concerned that I'm making a mistake and will regret it later. But, honestly, I feel as if I'm seeing clearly for the first time in weeks, and I realize that I deserve better than someone who would do something like this to me. Update 2. Things have become even more insane since my last update, and I'm not sure whether to laugh or scream at this point. But I wanted to provide an update because there have been some new developments that make the entire scenario even more ludicrous than it was before. Camila evidently concluded that because begging and tears were ineffective, she wanted to adopt a different strategy. And she's now alleging that the entire phony affair was my fault, that I wasn't paying enough attention to her, and she felt ignored and unloved in our marriage. She sent me a lengthy text message yesterday, outlining how she had been hinting for months about wanting more romance and attention, and how I had been ignoring all of her signs. So she felt compelled to take extraordinary measures to reach me, and she literally said, "You forced me to fake an affair," which is maybe the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. According to her updated account of events, this was not a joke at all. It was a sincere attempt to communicate her requirements to me after I had failed to detect her more subtle efforts. And she appears to sincerely feel that what she did was justified because I had not met her emotional needs. When I showed this communication to my lawyer, he simply shook his head and said he'd never seen somebody dig themselves into a deeper hole so skillfully. Because now, instead of simply confessing her mistake and begging for forgiveness, she's attempting to defend her actions and blaming me for leading her to them. But wait, things get worse. Camila has evidently been discussing our predicament with some of her other friends and coworkers. And she's been telling people that I'm divorcing her because she tried to spice up our marriage, and that I'm being overly possessive and controlling by failing to appreciate her efforts to make our relationship more exciting. I found out because my friend Dave works at the same company as Camila, and he approached me yesterday to ask what was going on. People at Camila's office are supposedly discussing how I'm filing for divorce over some innocent flirtation and jealousy games, and they believe I'm exaggerating. Dave knows me well enough to see that this did not sound right, so he asked for the true tale. When I informed him what had transpired, he was stunned and stated Camila had been presenting it as playful teasing to get me to pay attention, not a psychological manipulation effort. So now I'm dealing with the reality that Camila is actively rewriting history and portraying me as the bad guy to anyone willing to listen. And I'm sure her divorced pals agree with her account of events, as they were the ones who devised this dumb idea in the first place. I concluded I needed to shield myself from the narrative she was building, so I preserved all of the voicemails she left me shortly after I discovered the truth, in which she was crying, apologizing, and admitting that it was all a lie and that she had made a terrible mistake. Because I have a feeling I'll need proof of what happened when she tries to portray me as the villain. Speaking of her buddies, Giana appears to have woken up and realized she had ruined their entire plan. So she called me to attempt to mitigate the damage and persuade me that what they did wasn't so horrible, and that I should give Camila another chance. But, rather than strengthening her case, she exacerbated it by disclosing even more details about how meticulously organized and premeditated the entire event was. She explained that they had been planning this for 3 months before implementing it, and that they had researched various techniques to make males jealous and possessive. They chose the fake affair strategy because they believed it would be the most effective way to encourage me to improve my performance as a husband. She also indicated that they had been documenting the entire process in a group chat, offering updates on how I was reacting and applauding each time their strategy worked to make me more worried or attentive. And she mentioned that they had been calling it Project Wake Up Call, which makes me sick to think about. But here's what truly got my blood boiling. Giana expressed disappointment that it took me so long to confront Camila about the affair, since they expected me to get jealous and possessive much sooner. And they began to suspect that maybe I didn't care enough about Camila to fight for her. So they didn't only torture me for 6 weeks, they were also assessing my performance as a worried husband and wondering if I'd respond strongly enough to make their experiment worthwhile, as if I were some kind of lab rat who wasn't meeting their expectations. Giana also informed me that Monica had proposed they take things a step further and have Camila go on a phony date with a guy to see how far they could push me before I cracked. But, happily, they thought it was too hazardous since they were concerned that I may hire a private investigator or do anything else that would reveal their plot. The fact that they pondered taking it that far shows me that these women have no boundaries or sense of decency. They would have continued to push until they had utterly damaged my mental health, if they hadn't been stopped by their own incompetence. I also discovered that Camila's parents were aware of the situation because she had sought their advice on how to make me more romantic and attentive. But she explained that she was only planning some surprises and wanted to mix up our routine. They had no idea she was preparing a false affair. When her parents discovered the truth after I filed for divorce, they were supposedly shocked and informed Camila that what she had done was utterly wrong. But they are still trying to persuade me to give her another chance since they do not want their daughter's marriage to fail. Her father contacted me yesterday and said he understood why I was upset, but Camila had learned her lesson and divorce sounded like an overreaction. And I told him that his daughter's actions were extreme, and that my reaction was equal to the damage she had inflicted. I also informed him that if someone other than Camila had done this to me, say, if a stranger had spent 6 weeks convincing me that my wife was cheating purely for their own amusement, he would probably want me to file charges. The fact that it was done by his daughter makes it no less cruel or twisted. He didn't really have an explanation for it, and I believe he's beginning to realize that this isn't just a marital squabble that can be resolved with therapy and apologizing. The divorce proceedings are progressing, and my lawyer believes we will be able to finish things up fairly quickly because we do not have children and our finances are not overly problematic. And honestly, I just want it to be over so that I can begin rebuilding my life without having to deal with Camila's attempts to twist the narrative. I also intend to relocate to a different area of town once the divorce is finalized, because I do not want to run into Camila or her pals at the grocery store, gym, or any place else. And I believe that a fresh start in a new neighborhood will help me put this horror behind me. Some have questioned if I miss Camila, or if I am reconsidering the divorce. And frankly, I miss the person I thought she was. But I don't miss who she turned out to be. I'm actually pleased that I discovered what she was capable of before we had children, bought a house together, or made any other significant commitments. I can't help but wonder what would have occurred if Giana hadn't gotten drunk and disclosed the secret, and how long Camila would have been prepared to put up with me, believing she was cheating. And I understood that the woman I thought I married would never be able to watch me go through that much misery without telling me the truth. But the real Camila watched me lose weight, sleep less, and go around in a state of continual anxiety and dread. Not only did she not feel horrible about it, but she was actively enjoying it and reporting back to her friends on how successful their plan was. That is not someone I want to marry, and that is not someone I will ever trust again. And I'm done feeling bad about defending myself from someone who clearly does not have my best interests in mind. Update 3. I thought I'd finished updating the situation, but something happened yesterday that was so unbelievable that I had to share it, because I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. Camila and her friends seem determined to prove that they are even worse people than I imagined. So far, the divorce has been moving properly, and we're scheduled to finalize everything next week. I assumed the drama was finished, except for Camila's occasional attempts to contact me and persuade me to reconsider. However, it appears that her pals felt compelled to make one final attempt to correct the predicament they had created. Monica phoned me yesterday afternoon and said she wanted to meet up to discuss Camila and how we might work things out. And, against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her for coffee, because I was interested about what she could have to say that might change everything. So we met at this coffee cafe, and Monica began by apologizing for her involvement in the whole phony affair stuff. She admitted that they had made a mistake and gone too far. And I wondered whether she was going to accept some responsibility for what they did. But then she said she had a confession to make and that she needed to tell me something that would make me reconsider divorcing Camila. She appeared serious and dramatic, as if she was going to deliver a major bombshell that would make everything clear. What she said next was so ludicrous that I started laughing. Monica stated that the actual reason they devised the phony affair plan was because Camila had told them she feared I was cheating on her, and they reasoned that making me jealous would either establish my faithfulness or uncover my own affair. According to Monica's latest claim, Camila had been concerned for months that I was having an affair since I was working late at times, had changed my phone password, and had been going to the gym more frequently, and she had asked her pals for guidance on how to determine whether her concerns were right. Monica explained that they recommended the false affair plan to test my loyalty, because if I was cheating, it didn't matter if Camila appeared to be cheating as well. But if I was faithful, I'd become jealous and battle for our marriage, proving that I still loved her and wasn't cheating on her. I just gazed at her for a minute, stunned that she expected me to buy such blatant foolishness. And then I asked her why Camila had never mentioned being skeptical of me during any of our divorce discussions, why she hadn't brought up these issues while apologizing and begging me to take her back. Monica became agitated and stated that Camila felt embarrassed about being suspicious and did not want to accuse me of infidelity without evidence. so she kept her concerns to herself and simply sought her friends for suggestions on how to manage the matter. But here's the thing. I know this is utter nonsense, because Camila had no reason to be suspicious of me. I've never cheated on anyone in my life, and I've never felt inclined to cheat. And the things Monica cited as red flags are simply everyday life events that any married person would identify as entirely innocent. I occasionally work late because I have deadlines and tasks that demand extra hours. I changed my phone password since I received a new phone and required a more secure password for business apps. And I began going to the gym more frequently after my doctor advised me to do so following my most recent checkup. None of these items would raise a regular person's suspicions about cheating. Camila never expressed concern about any of this. She never asked me about working late, about my phone, or about the gym. So I know Monica is making something up to defend their actions. I informed Monica that her statement didn't make sense and sounded like she was attempting to alter history to make Camila look like the victim rather than the culprit. She became defensive, claiming that I was being unreasonable and that Camila had expressed genuine concern about our marriage. Then she stated that even if Camila's suspicions were correct, the fake affair plan had actually worked because it had made me more attentive and passionate, and that our marriage could have been stronger than ever if I hadn't overreacted and filed for divorce. I informed her that our marriage would have been stronger if Camila had simply spoken her issues with me rather than scheming with her bitter friends to psychologically torture me. And the fact that she thought lying and manipulation were preferable to honest communication revealed everything I needed to know about her and her pals. I rose up to leave, telling Monica to delete my phone number and inform her friends and ex-wife to do the same. I stated that the only person I wanted to hear from was my lawyer, and that their attempts to persuade me further simply reinforced my choice. I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her sitting there with her jaw almost touching the floor. I got in my car and drove for a bit, trying to process the sheer chutzpah of this latest lie. They had progressed from, "it was a harmless prank," to "you forced her to do it," and finally to, "we were actually testing your loyalty." It was like witnessing a masterclass in deflection and gaslighting. To be honest, the depravity was nearly impressive. They were so committed to their story that they would create entirely other realities to avoid accepting any responsibility. I'm tired of being the target of their jokes. The punchline is that I am finally free. Update number 4. So it's finally finished. After 8 months of the most ludicrous, drawn-out crap you can imagine, the divorce is official. 8 months. And I swear that every single day, Camila or one of her brilliant friends found a new way to make me question my sanity. But I'm on the other end of it now. And honestly, I'm numb. Monica tried to feed me nonsense about how they were testing my allegiance the last time I updated you. And I thought it was the height of their craziness. But I was mistaken. Oh, how wrong. For the next few months, Camila's strategy switched to a strange mix of playing the victim and then sending professional cold emails through her lawyer, as if she wasn't the same person who had left me sobbing voicemails just a few weeks before. One minute, she's telling common acquaintances about how I abandoned her at her lowest time. Her lawyer then sends a claim for the fondue pot we received as a wedding gift. Her parents kept attempting to mediate, which was essentially them asking me to forgive and forget, because marriage is hard. And I had to tell her father straight up. Marriage is difficult, definitely. However, what your daughter did not constitute marriage. It was a sick game. And I'm not playing anymore. I believe that ultimately got through to him, since they pulled back after that. And get this, Camila brought Jennifer with her to the final mediation session to provide emotional support. Jennifer, one of the architects of Project Wake Up Call, sat there with a smug expression on her face, as if she were a relationship guru. I looked at my lawyer and told him I wasn't going to say anything while that woman was in the room. The mediator had to beg her to leave. And Camila responded as if I had just committed the worst crime possible by refusing to let one of the persons who helped plan my psychological torture witness me divide some of our assets. You cannot make this stuff up. The day the documents were formally finalized felt weird. I received an email from my lawyer, and that was it. I'm still at my brother's apartment though. I'm now seeking my own place. I wanted time to decompress and get away from the place we shared. I know I did the right thing. I have no doubts about that. But it's still difficult to comprehend that this is my current reality. Divorced at 36, because my wife and her friends decided emotional abuse would be a fun way to spice up our marriage. It's still the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced, and I'm simply relieved it's finally over.